We have a real problem with the storm, and the aftermath of the storm is the authority.
We have a real problem with this storm, and the aftermath of the storm has left authorities scrambling. 1 minute ago, footage emerged from Eustace Conway's workshop that has left everyone questioning everything they thought they knew about this legendary mountain man and his remote sanctuary. What was discovered inside that workshop was so shocking, so unsettling, that even the most hardened camera crews stepped back in disbelief. The workshop until now had been considered fiercely private, almost untouchable, a place hidden among towering pines, accessible only by a narrow, overgrown path, where sunlight barely filters through the thick canopy above. For decades, Eustace Conway has been a figure of fascination, a man whose life and survival skills on the Appalachian slopes have inspired countless stories. Yet, even for someone of his notoriety, the secrets he has kept hidden in this workshop remained a mystery. Until now, what lay behind the moss-covered door, concealed from all but Eustace's closest associates, has sent shockwaves through the mountain men community. The building itself, deceptively simple from the outside, appears almost museum-like. Made entirely from logs, it boasts a slanted moss-draped roof, surrounded by layers of forest debris as though the woods themselves were protecting it. A single unassuming door stands at its center, holding within it a world that no outsider was meant to see. Visitors who have requested entry were routinely turned away, often met with Eustace's characteristic silence, a silence so deliberate it could chill a man to his core. Sometimes he would redirect the conversation elsewhere, avoiding the topic of the workshop entirely. To the untrained eye, it was merely an old rustic shed. But those familiar with Eustace knew there was more to it, something alive within those walls, something that demanded respect and secrecy. The circumstances that led to the rare opportunity to glimpse inside were as unusual as they were tense. Eustace had been acting strangely for weeks, behavior noted by the production team well before the filming of the workshop began. He seemed distracted, often zoning out mid-conversation, eyes darting toward the hidden structure as if expecting it to speak back. Crew members reported that during interviews, Eustace would suddenly stop speaking, frozen in place as though hearing something imperceptible to everyone else. His usual confidence, the very aura that had earned him respect as a survivalist and mountain man, had softened into something resembling anxiety. Anticipation or unease, no one could say for sure, but it was clear that whatever he felt, it ran deep. Over time, Eustace's movements became more calculated. He began waking in the dead of night or the gray hours before dawn to walk the path to the workshop without the aid of a light, navigating by memory alone. Crew members who glimpsed him on these secretive walks felt as if something fundamental had shifted within the man. For years, the workshop had been a psychological fortress, a repository of the matters closest to his heart. Now he was attempting to let go, to allow outsiders, strangers, into this sacred space. Understanding this internal struggle was impossible for those observing him. It was a silent war, fought in the shadow of pine and moss in the eerie quiet of the Appalachian woods. Finally, the day arrived. The production team was granted permission to enter. Everything appeared ordinary at first glance, yet for Eustace, his world was quietly unraveling. The birds had gone silent, and the forest seemed less alive, the air heavier. He led the group down the narrow path to the workshop in complete silence, each step punctuating the mounting tension. Crew members later described it as walking into a place where the rules of the everyday world no longer applied. It was as though each step they took was guided not by gravity or earth, but by some unseen force, some expectation woven into the very fibers of the forest. Strange events preceding this moment added to the anxiety. That morning, Eustace had vanished. Crew members and assistants searched frantically, only to find him suddenly standing among them, calm and unbothered. "I've been around all along," he muttered, as if the forest itself had hidden him from sight. No one questioned it. The journey to the workshop resumed, thoughts of the morning's mystery mingling with the growing anticipation of what awaited inside. When they reached the door, it seemed heavier than expected, almost resisting their presence. The hinges groaned in protest as Eustace pushed, a squeal breaking the silence and heightening the group's collective anxiety. The door swung open, and for the first time the workshop revealed its secrets. What greeted them was nothing like they had expected. It was not a simple storage space. It was not a place for tools or ordinary survival gear. Instead, the walls were covered with carved faces, hundreds of them, each spanning the wooden logs from floor to ceiling. Some faces were grotesque, some serene, all haunting. The team stepped back instinctively, their eyes wide with disbelief. As Eustace drew open the window folds, the details became horrifyingly clear. Each face was meticulously crafted, a frozen expression captured in wood, each one telling a story that no one could fully understand. Stories and rumors that had circulated for years suddenly made sense. Former apprentices spoke of nights spent watching Eustace labor tirelessly by candlelight, muttering to himself about the connection between form and spirit. One told of seeing him dismantle an old clock, reconstructing it using tree sap and leather bands as though attempting to trap time itself. Another described how the faces seemed to move when no one was looking directly at them, their expressions shifting slightly, mocking and alive. The crew could hardly bear to look directly at the walls. The floor was bare earth, cold and uneven, and the workshop seemed to exude a strange vitality, as if the building itself were conscious, watching the intruders. Outside, a storm began to rage, lightning striking the towering trees, thunder reverberating through the mountain. The crew noticed almost instinctively that there was one room none of them dared enter. A solitary corner at the far end of the workshop seemed to radiate an unsettling energy, a place where shadows moved without source, and the carved faces appeared even more grotesque in their silence. Eustace's own anxiety mirrored that of the crew. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his hands trembled as he showed them around. This had been his sanctuary for years, the one place where the outside world could not reach him, and now he was offering it to strangers, exposing the deepest, most personal corners of his life. The workshop was more than wood and tools. It was the embodiment of his fears, obsessions, and reverence for the natural world, and revealing it was as much a trial for him as it was a discovery for others. The storm intensified, punctuating the scene with flashes of white and deafening crashes of thunder. Crew members whispered nervously, unable to reconcile the artistry of the carved faces with the unease that radiated from them. One claimed to have seen a figure in the untouched corner, moving just out of view. The presence was fleeting, almost imagined, yet the fear was real. The room seemed to breathe, the air thick with an unspoken threat, and the boundaries between reality and the imagination began to blur. For those watching, the question became, who is Eustace Conway really? The man who had taught generations about survival, about harmony with the wilderness, about mastering the mountains. Was he also a guardian of something far darker, far more complex? The workshop was no longer simply a space of creation. It had become a living testament to obsession, a gallery of faces that recorded not just expression but intent, memory, and spirit. As the crew hesitated near the far end of the workshop, none of them dared enter the room from which an unsettling presence seemed to emanate. Eustace noticed their fear, his eyes reflecting his own uncertainty. He had spent decades guarding this space, shaping it, imbuing it with a quiet, almost sacred power. To allow the world inside was a risk he had long avoided. Now, standing at the threshold of his sanctuary, he wrestled with the consequences of that decision. And yet, the terror was not confined to the untouched room or the carved faces. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within the workshop. Lightning struck, illuminating the forest in stark, fleeting bursts, and for brief moments the carvings seemed to shift, their expressions twisting in ways that made the crew gasp. The building itself creaked, groaned, and shifted imperceptibly, as if the walls themselves were alive, judging, watching, waiting. Eustace's workshop, once a symbol of solitude and control, had transformed into a stage of confrontation with the unknown. Each face, each shadow, each sound became a story of its own, a challenge to the observers to comprehend what was being shown. For the crew, the line between reality and legend blurred. The workshop was no longer simply a hidden space in the forest. It was an experience, a confrontation with the mind of a man who had lived alongside nature, yet had created something eerily human within it. Even as the footage was recorded, the storm raged on, ensuring that the secrecy of the mountain could not be lifted entirely. Questions remained unanswered. What drove Eustace to carve these faces? What connection did he feel to each expression, each gaze frozen in wood? Was it artistry, obsession, or a ritual of some kind? And what lurked in the one room they dared not enter? One thing was clear: the workshop, the man, the storm, they were inseparable. Each element reflected the other, each contributing to a mystery that seemed destined to endure. The world outside could only watch, captivated and unnerved, as Eustace Conway revealed a fragment of his soul, leaving the rest shrouded in shadows, waiting for the next moment of revelation. And so, as the camera panned slowly across the carved faces, catching the flicker of lightning, and as the wind howled through the surrounding pines, the audience was left with a chilling understanding. This was more than a workshop. It was a window into the mind of a mountain man whose life was dedicated to the wilderness, yet whose secrets had grown darker and stranger than anyone could have imagined. The storm continued. The workshop waited, and Eustace Conway remained the enigma at the heart of it all. The storm outside raged with a fury that mirrored the tension inside Eustace Conway's workshop. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the dense forest in stark flashes that cast long, shifting shadows across the ground. Inside, the carved faces that lined the walls seemed almost to breathe with each flicker of light, their expressions catching the crew's attention in ways that made their skin crawl. Hundreds of faces, each unique, some grotesque, some serene, yet all hauntingly lifelike, stared silently at the intruders. Their eyes seemed to follow every movement, every gesture, as though the walls themselves were aware of the intruder's presence. Crew members whispered to one another, debating whether their minds were playing tricks, or if these carvings held a presence far beyond wood and craftsmanship. Eustace moved slowly through the workshop, his hand brushing against the log walls, tracing each carved face with reverence. He spoke softly, almost to himself, describing how some faces were inspired by people who had passed through his sanctuary, students, friends, or even strangers glimpsed briefly on the path to his cabin. The significance of each carving was cryptic, layered with meanings that blended artistry, spiritual meditation, and a personal record of emotion and connection. Some faces seemed to reflect sorrow, others joy, and some held expressions that were impossible to define, like frozen moments of thought or memory. The crew's eyes were drawn almost magnetically to one room at the far end of the workshop, a place none had dared enter. The doorway appeared warped, dark, almost as if it was swallowing the dim light that filtered through the windows. Shadows pooled at its threshold, and a chill ran through everyone as they approached. Even Eustace paused, his hand hovering over the doorframe. The storm outside intensified, wind rattling the roof, rain hammering against the logs, lightning illuminating the room's entrance in brief, brilliant flashes. Crew members held their breath, tense anticipation thick in the air. Finally, Eustace stepped forward. The floorboards creaked underfoot, each sound amplified by the oppressive silence inside. With the door pushed open slowly, the camera captured the first glimpse into the forbidden room. The air was heavier here, almost tangible, and a faint movement in the shadows drew involuntary gasps from the crew. Shapes shifted just beyond the edge of sight, too fleeting to identify but enough to make the imagination run wild. The room was smaller, darker, yet every inch seemed alive with purpose. As the crew began to settle their gaze, Eustace explained some of his methods, recounting nights spent carving alone, muttering about the connection between form and spirit. He spoke of rituals, the quiet of the night, the smell of sap and wood shavings, the rhythm of chisel against log. For him, this workshop was a sanctuary, a space where the physical world intertwined with the spiritual, where creation became meditation and obsession became understanding. Some crew members began to see the artistry, the patience, the devotion, while others remained frozen with fear, unsettled by the way the carving seemed to shift imperceptibly as lightning flashed. The storm outside mirrored the growing tension within. Thunder rolled over the mountaintop, lightning slashing across the sky, illuminating the carved faces in stark, ghostly relief. Each flash seemed to animate the workshop, breathing life into the frozen expressions, making them appear as if they were whispering in silence. One crew member swore he saw a figure move in the far corner, fleeting and impossible to pinpoint. The air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing against them with the weight of something unseen, yet undeniably present. The bare earth floor amplified every movement, every creak of the wooden logs, and the team could feel the workshop itself responding to their presence. Eustace's tension was palpable. He had spent decades shaping this space, controlling it, guarding it, and now, exposing it to the world made him uneasy in ways that were both visible and invisible. This was more than a workshop. It was a living extension of his mind, his spirit, and his connection to the wilderness. Every carved face, every shadow, every faint movement was a testament to the complexities of a life lived entirely in devotion to the mountains, to solitude, and to ritual. As the crew ventured further, each step seemed to draw them deeper into the mystery. They reflected aloud, questioning the balance between genius and obsession, inspiration and madness. Eustace's explanations, though cryptic, offered glimpses into his philosophy, that creation required solitude, that understanding required patience, and that life in the wild demanded both respect and ritual. The workshop was a record of this philosophy, etched into wood and shadow, alive with meaning that only Eustace could fully grasp. Suddenly, a sharp cracking noise echoed from the far corner of the forbidden room. The crew froze. The shadows shifted in ways they had not before. Eustace's brow furrowed, tension visible in his posture as he peered into the darkness. The storm's fury seemed to amplify everything, the rain, the wind, the lightning, and the carvings on the walls became even more imposing, their expressions caught in the intermittent glow. The air was electric with anticipation, and for a moment, everyone understood that this was a place where the boundaries between reality, perception, and imagination blurred completely. The camera panned slowly across the workshop, capturing the haunted eyes of the carved faces, the trembling hands of the crew, and the distant flashes of lightning illuminating the room in stark white light. Eustace Conway stood at the center, a solitary figure of calm in the eye of the storm, yet even he seemed to sense that his sanctuary had taken on a life of its own. There was no denying it. This was no longer merely a workshop. It was a living testament to a mind entwined with wilderness, obsession, and mystery, a space where secrets had been kept, revealed, and now, partially understood by those brave or foolish enough to witness them. As the thunder roared and lightning struck the surrounding trees, the forbidden room remained dark, its secrets unbroken, its presence ominous. The carved faces seemed to watch, silent witnesses to everything unfolding, and for those observing, the chilling realization set in. Eustace Conway's sanctuary held more than artistry or tradition. It contained something alive, something that defied explanation, something that would haunt the crew long after they left the mountains. The storm raged on, yet inside the silence of the workshop was heavier than ever. The shadows in the corners seemed to pulse in rhythm with the thunder. Each carved face held a story. Each movement suggested intent. Each moment hinted at something deeper, darker, and far more mysterious than anyone could have imagined. And in the center of it all, Eustace Conway, the man who had mastered the mountains, now faced the truth of his own creation, that the workshop he had guarded so fiercely was no longer entirely under his control. The camera held its final shot on the far corner of the room, where shadows flickered and a faint, almost imperceptible movement passed. Then, with the storm crashing overhead and the walls lined with 100 silent witnesses, the sequence faded, leaving only questions and an understanding that some secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, have a life of their own. The storm outside had reached a deafening crescendo, rattling the walls of Eustace Conway's workshop and sending sheets of rain cascading through the gaps in the moss-covered roof. Inside, the carved faces lining the walls seemed almost alive under the flickering light of lightning. Their eyes appeared to shift, expressions subtly changing with each flash. The crew felt a chill run down their spines, their focus drawn not to the craftsmanship but to the unsettling sense that the workshop itself was aware of them. Shadows pooled unnaturally in the corners, moving ever so slightly as if guided by some unseen hand. Eustace moved slowly, his fingers tracing the faces with reverence, but the tension in his posture was unmistakable. "They're more than wood," he murmured, voice low, almost hesitant. "Each one holds a memory, a moment, sometimes a regret. I carved to remember, to preserve what cannot remain in the fleeting world." Crew members exchanged uneasy glances. There was artistry here, yes, but there was also something else, an obsession, a compulsion that brushed against the edge of madness. As they navigated the uneven floor, the crew noticed subtle disturbances in the bare earth beneath their feet, small depressions, faint markings, remnants of objects long buried or rituals long forgotten. Eustace explained that he often left items in the soil, symbolic tokens intertwined with the carvings above. "This room, this entire space, it has a pulse," he said quietly, eyes scanning the shadows. You feel it. Some of you more than others. It's alive, in its own way. The words were not metaphorical. The air itself seemed to thrum with quiet energy, thick and tangible, pressing against each intruder as though testing their resolve. Their attention turned to the farthest room, the one no one had entered before. Its doorway was darker, the air colder, and the carved faces lining the walls leading up to it seemed older, more grotesque, their expressions twisted in ways that made the crew hesitate. The shadows at its threshold were heavier, almost oppressive, and even the storm outside seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Eustace placed a hand lightly on the warped doorframe, his expression grave. "Not everyone is ready to see this," he said. His calm was deliberate, a counterpoint to the rising dread in the air. With measured movements, he pushed the door open. A gust of wind from the storm swept inside, rattling the windows and illuminating the faces with erratic bursts of light. The carvings within were unlike any they had seen. Older, more detailed, some even distorted, as if capturing not only form but essence. Some crew members instinctively stepped back, hearts hammering as they noticed that a few faces bore uncanny resemblances to people who had previously visited the workshop. Whispers spread through the team, disbelief mixed with fear. Could it be memory? Could it be something more? Lightning flashed directly through a small window, casting dramatic shadows that made the faces appear almost alive. The workshop seemed to breathe in that moment. The combination of storm, shadows, and carvings creating an atmosphere so thick it was almost tangible. Faint scraping sounds echoed from the corners, some subtle, almost imagined, others undeniable. The crew's anxiety was mirrored by the intensity of the storm, each strike of thunder amplifying the suspense within the wooden walls. Eustace stepped forward, narrating his process. "These aren't just carvings," he said. "They're reminders. Some are regrets, some are lessons, some are prayers. I speak to them, and sometimes they answer, in ways you cannot hear but you can feel." The crew exchanged wary glances, each person processing this revelation differently. Some were fascinated, drawn to the dedication and depth of his practice. Others were frightened, unsettled by the possibility that the workshop contained something beyond the tangible, something that might be watching them as they watched it. The storm reached its peak. Rain pelted the roof, lightning streaked across the sky in brilliant arcs, and thunder shook the mountains as if announcing some ancient verdict. In that chaos, the carved faces seemed almost animated, expressions flickering between life and wood. Shadows danced along the walls, and in the far corner of the room, movement was seen, subtle, fleeting, impossible to fully capture on camera. Gasps echoed among the crew. Even Eustace's calm veneer trembled for a moment as he acknowledged the shifting energy within his sanctuary. The crew took tentative steps toward the deepest part of the workshop, drawn by both curiosity and fear. Each step seemed heavier than the last, as if the floor itself resisted them. Eustace remained their guide, silent in thought, aware that they were witnessing more than craftsmanship. They were experiencing a manifestation of his mind, his obsession, and the mountain itself. The deeper room revealed carvings that were grotesque in their detail, faces twisted with emotion, eyes too human to be mere wood, some contorted as though in silent scream. The presence of these faces, combined with the storm outside, made the air feel electric, charged with anticipation and something undefinable. A sudden, sharp crack echoed from the corner of the forbidden room. The crew froze, hearts pounding. Shadows shifted as if responding to the sound. Eustace's expression hardened. This is why it is sacred," he murmured, barely audible over the storm. Every sense heightened. The smell of damp earth and wood shavings, the sound of rain and wind, the flicker of lightning revealing the intricate carvings. It was as if the workshop itself was asserting its presence, reminding all who entered that they were intruders in a space both living and ancient. The camera slowly panned across the workshop, capturing the haunting eyes of the carved faces, the trembling hands of the crew, and the distant flashes of lightning that revealed fleeting movement in the shadows. Even in the storm's chaos, the workshop felt alive, aware, and judging. Eustace stood in the center, a solitary figure of calm amidst the swirling tension. Yet the subtle furrow in his brow betrayed that even he could not fully control the space he had created. The storm continued its relentless assault, the carved faces silent witnesses to everything that transpired. Faint shapes in the corners flickered in and out of view, leaving the crew in stunned silence. Every carved face held a story, a memory, or a warning, and yet even in the presence of this immense collection of expression and obsession, the greatest mystery remained, the workshop's ultimate purpose, and the secrets of the final room that none had dared enter fully. The thunder rolled on, the wind howled, and the lightning illuminated the farthest corners once again. The crew retreated slightly, uncertainty and awe mingling in their minds. Eustace warned softly, "Some things here, some things cannot be understood immediately. They are alive in ways you may never fully comprehend." The workshop itself seemed to pulse in agreement, a heartbeat of wood, shadow, and memory, binding man and nature, creator and creation, in a terrifyingly intimate connection. As the camera held on the deepest part of the room, the flickering shadows revealed faces that seemed to twist with expression, faces of those who had walked these paths before, frozen forever in timber. A final streak of lightning illuminated movement that no one could explain, and then, as suddenly as it began, the storm receded, leaving only the oppressive silence of the workshop, heavy and knowing. The audience is left with a chilling realization. Eustace Conway's sanctuary is more than a place of work, more than a gallery of memory. It is a living, breathing entity, one that observes, preserves, and challenges anyone who dares enter. The mountain man, once untouchable and enigmatic, has revealed only a fraction of his secrets. The workshop waits alive, eternal, and infinitely more terrifying than anyone could imagine.